As Canada, the United States, and Mexico open up their borders for a free trade bloc to challenge the world, behind the scenes, a new mafia is writing their own rules. Free trade has brought an increase in drug trafficking, corruption, and murder. This is a story of the dark side of free trade. May 1993. Shadowy forces of Mexican society converge at the Guadalajara City Airport. Drug traffickers, the police, the army, one of Mexico's elite families, and the Vatican's man in Mexico. The result, the assassination of a cardinal archbishop of the Roman Catholic Church. It was a magnicidio.
Magnicidios is a term unique to Spanish and means assassination of people at the very top of the pinnacles of church and state, effectively delivering a message that no one in Mexico, the president included, is beyond the reach of the drug cartels and their associates.
You can find in Mexico a very close relationship between high officials, people who are in the most important financial groups, and organized crime.
If the system had achieved anything, it was precisely to allow the elites, and I include the drug dealers, to solve their conflicts, their contradictions, their problems without resorting to violence. That has broken down.
The second assassination in recent times that shook Mexican society to its foundations is the 1994 killing of Luis Donaldo Colosio, the candidate selected to succeed Carlos Salinas as president of the Mexican Republic. Colosio was killed at a political rally in this Tijuana slum. Within months, the murder site was covered over by this plaza. Many believe the crime has received the same treatment. The questions surrounding Colosio's murder are as disturbing as those of the cardinal. Was Colosio killed by narco-traffickers in a power struggle among Mexico's political and economic elite? This assassination, this magnicidio, is becoming as murky and mysterious for Mexicans as the JFK assassination. As a senior analyst with the World Policy Institute, a New York think tank, Andrew Redding specializes in narco-politics in Mexico. In testimony before the U.S. Congress and briefings to Canada's External Affairs Department, Redding has tried to sound the alarm about a narcotics crisis that has grown with free trade.
What's making it easier, really, at this point, with NAFTA in place, is that the volume of goods going across the border has multiplied. They'll have the right labels on the outside and so forth. They'll be labeled as containing tomatoes bound for, say, Toronto. And I mean, one of the things that the United States doesn't want to do in the context of NAFTA is to end up slowing everything to a crawl at the border. And so the most the United States can do is really do spot inspections based on suspicion. And what the Mexican drug traffickers are doing are playing the odds. I mean, over 90% probably get through.
The volume has also multiplied thanks to the Colombian cocaine cartels. The cocaine cartels turned to Mexico and its 3,000-kilometer border with the United States, and the Colombians were virtually stopped everywhere else.
The United States was very effective in cracking down on the Caribbean air and sea routes. That really created a very fertile alternative going through Mexico, and that's exactly what's happened. I mean, from being the vast majority going through the Caribbean to being 80% or so going up through Mexico.
The Mexican syndicates are old hands at the game. Heroin and marijuana have been cultivated by Mexican drug lords for decades. The syndicates are sophisticated and have the protection of powerful friends. They smuggle into the United States by courier across the Rio Grande. They use airlines. They dig giant tunnels to warehouses on the U.S. side of the border. The Mexican drug syndicates agreed to transship Colombian cocaine in exchange for half of every load. In the multinational enterprise of drug trafficking, this may have made the Mexicans the most powerful narcotics mafia in the world.
What was once measured in millions of dollars today is measured in billions. And we're not talking marijuana anymore. It moved on to cocaine. Now it's moved on to methamphetamine as well. It's gotten and heroin. As a result, this has turned into the sort of businesses so large that it exceeds in absolute terms the revenues that come from what is otherwise Mexico's largest export, which is oil.
On the front lines of the drug war, U.S. security forces warned Washington about unmistakable evidence that Mexico was outstripping Colombia. In November 1991, a U.S. Forces tracking plane followed and videotaped as 7 U.S.-trained Mexican agents aboard another plane were in hot pursuit of a major cocaine deal. They forced down the narco-traffickers, but at the traffickers' plane, the Mexican agents were ambushed and killed by the Mexican army, who reportedly stole the drugs. The U.S. military plane was shot at and hit, but it made it back to base. This could have been a major international incident. Instead, the story was downplayed so as not to upset free trade negotiations. The Bush administration ordered that the NAFTA debate ignore the swelling drug business. Expert on Mexico and narco-trafficking, Andrew Redding.
It was at red-hot fever pitch, but obviously you couldn't very well draw attention to that problem at the same time as you're trying to get the citizens, and particularly the Congress of the United States and the Parliament of Canada, to approve a trade agreement with Mexico.
Under 24-hour protection for her own safety, Teresa Jardy is a lawyer and co-founder of Amnesty International in Mexico. Before resigning from the Salinas government on principle, Teresa Jardy heard and saw privileged information, especially from one powerful American official.
Mira, cuando yo era delegada de la Procuraduría General de la República, tuve la oportunidad de conocer
When I was with the Attorney General's office, I had the opportunity of meeting the head of the CIA. He was extremely upset over the signing of NAFTA because he said the sole purpose of signing the agreement was to turn Mexico into a paradise of money laundering, a paradise of drug trafficking, a paradise of corruption.
NAFTA also brought with it not only of the integration of the legal economies, but also of the illegal activities, like drugs.
Sergio Aguayo, professor of international relations, University of Mexico.
That's economy. Profit is profit.
Today, Ernesto Zedillo is serving a 6-year term as president of Mexico, a place he acknowledges is rife with money laundering, drug trafficking, and corruption. But like every other president of Mexico in the last 60 years, Zedillo promises the rule of law will now prevail. Like every other president of Mexico in the last 60 years, Zedillo comes from the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party. On the presidential level, Mexico is a one-party state.
We are not a dictatorship, but we are not a democracy. And the struggle has been very painful and continues to be very painful.
The three presidents who ruled Mexico from 1970 to 1988 reportedly left office $2 billion richer. An investigation is now underway into Carlos Salinas, the last president who made the deal with the U.S. and Canada for free trade.
I thought you'd appreciate it.
The Salinas family are charged with graft, corruption, and even the murder of an opponent, the president-elect of the Chamber of Deputies. Salinas is simply the last in a long series of Mexican presidents who have dishonored the nation's history. This is the searing vision of muralist Jose Orozco. Orozco saw Mexicans' reformist ideal of the 20s and 30s betrayed by corrupt judges and politicians, landowners and industrialists, in league with the military who tortured and murdered opponents. For decades, trials and investigations have demonstrated the truth of his vision, shown the breadth of corruption among many of the estimated 10,000 families that rule Mexico's 94 million people. Writer Carlos Monsiváis.
At the beginning, it was the party of the generals, not of the people, of the generals and the factions of the Mexican Revolution. Every day, I look back in anger. Just trying to see what happened to us and why these people rob too much and corrupt so much and lie so much. These government people.
Growing up as the son of a foreign minister and educated at U.S. Ivy League schools where he teaches, Jorge Castañeda knows the Mexican elite inside out.
The PRI as a political system, rather than as a party, is obviously responsible to a large degree for the mess the country is in. But former President Salinas, more specifically, is more responsible for the specific mess the country is in now. And then all of his supporters, allies, and acolytes in the United States and in Canada are also responsible because they supported him.
But Salinas, the whole term he was president, he had the support of Mexico's elite.
He certainly had the support of the elite.
And they made a lot of money.
They made an enormous amount of money. They were very happy with what he was doing.
Let's be concrete. In the case of Admiral Mauricio Schlesky, who was the first Secretary of the Navy chosen by Salinas, it meant that his sailors at the Matamoros naval base were on official business, transshipping drugs into Texas across the border. When all this was brought public, and this is very significant, President Salinas did not just dismiss him. He waited until things became untenable politically before asking the guy to retire, but then there was no investigation. There were no further consequences. And this is a pattern you see over and over again.
This man, Eduardo Valle, was recruited by Salinas to head a major anti-narcotics task force. Discovering the Salinas government was protecting narco-traffickers, Valle photocopied damaging evidence and fled for his life to the United States, where he has testified before Congress.
I proved that judges gave judicial protection to the drug traffickers. I proved that people in the federal judicial police gave judicial and political protection to the drug traffickers. I proved all this with official documents.
Carlos Hank was a senior Salinas cabinet minister investigated by Valle. Hank is one of the richest and most powerful men in Mexico, head of the old guard of the PRI, known as the Dinosaurs, and kingmaker of the current president. Hank is named by Eduardo Valle as the primary link between the last government and the narcotics mafia. The Hank family has a powerful grip on Mexico, owning or controlling banks, construction companies, a resort in Cancun linked to money laundering, an airline investigated for shipping cocaine by the ton, and dominating the Hank family operation in Tijuana, the Agua Caliente racetrack. A politician who is poor, Hank once quipped, is a poor politician. Hank's fortune is estimated at $1.3 billion.
Carlos Hank Gonzalez had become the paradigm of what went wrong with the Mexican Revolution.
International relations expert Sergio Aguayo.
No. Carlos Hank was a poor rural teacher in elementary school in the state of Mexico. And he entered politics, and he was very successful in businesses because without never leaving public service, for 50 years he was a public servant, he became one of the richest men in the world. And nobody can explain how he did it.
The son of Carlos Hank, Jorge, got himself some unwelcome publicity when he was caught smuggling exotic animals into the country. But that's the least of his troubles.
Now, Jorge Hank Ron is someone who has suspicious swirling around him for a variety of reasons, including murder. Namely, in 1988, his security guards from his Agua Caliente racetrack in Tijuana murdered a newspaper editor who had been investigating his private finances. Now, why would this be such a sore point? Basically because of laundering money for the mob through his Tijuana Agua Caliente racetrack.
At a zoo kept by the Hanks at the Agua Caliente racetrack, the cages are full of big cats. In Tijuana, we were told that the cats are also the favorite of the Arellano brothers, identified by the New York Times as narco-traffickers heading the billion-dollar Tijuana cartel. Head of the clan is Benjamin Arellano. It is said he tests new gang members with a trial by tiger. The new member must enter the cage with the animal's dinner. If he cracks, he becomes the next meal. The Arellano brothers pay at least $18 million a month for protection. Massive drug trafficking can't exist without it. In Mexico, the federal judicial police, the federales, are responsible for combating drug trafficking. But successive investigations are showing the opposite. Too often, they are the guards and executioners for the drug syndicates, rubbing out the competition. In many drug cases, the federales keep half the cash they find, turn the other half over to their superior, while the seized drugs go up the line to be resold by commanders. In some cases, they go through public relations exercises, harvesting marijuana plants for the TV cameras. But one drug trafficker said they only burned the low-grade stuff while selling the best themselves.
My name is Marie Clara Costa, and I am presently the chairperson of the Mexican Commission for the Defense and Promotion of Human Rights.
Protecting and defending victims of the federales are one of the Commission's main jobs. In Mexico, you're guilty until proven innocent.
The police in Mexico are the most feared and hated of all corporations.
Many police commanders and judges are offered two choices by gangsters, the bribe or the bullet. As they say in Spanish, plata o plomo, silver or lead.
They have very low pay. So most of the money that they have comes from their work. And they're extorters. They are torturers. They Many of them are involved in drug trafficking, and I'm quoting official sources. I'm not, revealing anything that isn't known. And they have total impunity. They're a mafia. That's what they are. And if you have trouble with the judicial police, you better start worrying, because anything can happen to you. Anything.
In Guadalajara, Mexico's second largest city, the judicial police, the federales, would be implicated in assassination. A promotional video boasts